Sometimes, the person who changes your life isn't the one you were looking for, but the one who got lost and found you instead. The sun hangs high over the Mekong Delta, heavy and golden, pressing heat into every inch of the endless rice fields that stretch like waves of amber to the horizon, and Lan moves through it barefoot, her steps steady, her hands quick and practiced as she cuts each stalk with quiet precision, the soft rustle of grain and the distant hum of cicadas forming the rhythm of her world, a world untouched by glass towers or boardrooms. A world where survival depends on the land beneath your feet and the strength in your hands. Sweat beads along her temples, her simple brown blouse clinging lightly to her skin, but she doesn't stop, because stopping means thinking, and thinking means remembering things she would rather leave buried, like the day her father stood in this same field, staring at men in polished shoes who promised development and progress, promises that took everything and gave nothing back, promises that ended with debts, silence, and a funeral that came too soon. She exhales slowly, pushing the thought away, focusing instead on the clean cut of each golden stem, until a sound breaks the rhythm, low and unfamiliar, like a machine struggling against the land itself, and she pauses, lifting her head, eyes narrowing toward the narrow dirt road that cuts between the fields, where something doesn't belong, a black SUV, sleek and foreign, sitting at an awkward angle as if the earth rejected it. One tire sunk deep into the muddy edge of a narrow irrigation ditch. The engine stutters, then dies, leaving a silence that feels heavier than the heat, and for a moment, nothing moves, not the wind, not the birds, not even Lan, who watches from a distance, her grip tightening slightly around the handle of her sickle as the driver's door opens slowly, and a man steps out, tall, broad-shouldered, his crisp shirt now wrinkled and damp with sweat, his dark hair slightly disheveled, a sharp contrast against the chaos of the situation. Like someone who was never meant to be here, someone who clearly took a wrong turn somewhere far beyond these fields. He looks around, confusion flashing across his face as he takes in the endless rows of rice, the absence of buildings, the unfamiliar silence of a place that doesn't answer to money or status, and for a brief second, something vulnerable flickers in his expression, something almost lost. Lan watches him hesitate, watches him walk around the SUV, inspecting the sunken wheel as if logic alone might fix it, and she almost turns back to her work, because men like him don't belong here, and people like her don't matter to men like him. But then he tries to push the vehicle, alone, his shoes slipping slightly in the mud, his effort clumsy, ineffective, and despite herself, she exhales sharply under her breath, a mix of annoyance and something softer she doesn't want to name. She sets her tool down, wipes her hands against her pants, and starts walking toward him, each step deliberate, the heat rising off the ground in shimmering waves. Until he notices her, his posture straightening. Instinctively, like he's remembering who he's supposed to be, but there's still that same uncertainty in his eyes when they meet hers, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, the distance between their worlds stretching wider than the fields around them. Then Lan breaks the silence, her voice calm, steady, but edged with something guarded. "You're not from around here, are you?" And he lets out a quiet breath, almost a small, disbelieving laugh, running a hand through his hair as if trying to reset the moment. "That obvious," he says, his accent unmistakably American, polished yet softened now by exhaustion, and Lan glances at the SUV, then back at him, unimpressed. "Your car is stuck," she says simply, as if stating the most obvious truth in the world, and for a second, he just looks at her, then nods, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Yeah. I figured that part out," he admits, and something about the way he says it, without arrogance, without pretense, makes her pause just a fraction longer than she should. The sun beats down harder, the air thick and unmoving, and Lan sighs quietly, stepping past him toward the wheel, crouching down to assess the situation with practiced eyes, while behind her, the stranger watches, no longer the man in control, no longer the one who commands rooms or closes deals, just a man stranded in the middle of nowhere, waiting for a girl in a rice field to show him the way out. Lan presses her palm into the thick mud around the sunken tire, her fingers moving with quiet certainty as she studies the angle of the wheel, the way the earth has swallowed it inch by inch, and she shakes her head slightly, more to herself than to him, before glancing up, her eyes sharp under the brim of the faded conical hat resting nearby. "You drove too close to the edge," she says, her tone matter-of-fact, not accusing, just stating what is already obvious. And Ethan exhales, shifting his weight as he looks down at his polished shoes now stained with streaks of brown, a detail that would have irritated him hours ago but now feels strangely irrelevant. "I was following the GPS," he replies, almost defensively, as if that should explain everything, and Lan lets out a small breath that might have been a laugh if it carried any warmth. The land does not care about your GPS, she says, standing up and brushing the dirt from her hands. Her movement simple, efficient, grounded in a kind of knowledge that cannot be downloaded or mapped, and for a moment Ethan just looks at her, taking in the contrast between her calm confidence and his own misplaced certainty, realizing how completely out of his element he is. The heat presses in harder, and Lan walks a few steps toward the ditch, scanning the ground before pointing to a narrow strip of firmer soil. We need to push from that side, she says, already moving into position. And Ethan nods quickly, stepping beside her, his hesitation gone, replaced by a quiet willingness to follow her lead, and when they push, the effort is immediate, the resistance heavy, the vehicle barely shifting at first, the mud gripping the tire like it refuses to let go. But Lan adjusts her stance, her feet digging into the ground, her shoulders steady. Again, she says, and there is something in her voice, firm, unwavering, that makes him push harder this time, and the SUV jerks slightly. A small victory that feels bigger than it should, and for a brief second, Ethan laughs under his breath, surprised by the satisfaction of it, surprised by how something so simple can feel so real. They pause, catching their breath, and Lan reaches into a small woven bag at her side, pulling out a worn bottle of water, offering it without ceremony, and Ethan hesitates only a fraction of a second before taking it. The coolness of the bottle a relief against his palm. Thank you, he says, his voice softer now, less guarded, and she shrugs lightly. It is just water, she replies, as if kindness here does not need to be named or acknowledged, as if it is simply part of the air they are breathing. He takes a sip, then another, realizing how thirsty he is, how unprepared he had been for this place, for this heat, for this moment, and when he hands the bottle back, their fingers almost brush, but she pulls away naturally, not shy, just distant, like someone who has learned not to linger where she does not belong. They push again, and this time the tire lifts free with a wet sound, the vehicle rolling back onto solid ground, and for a moment they both stand there, breathing, the tension dissolving into the quiet hum of the field, and Ethan straightens, wiping his hands against his pants, looking at the SUV as if it is something entirely different now, something less like a symbol of control and more like a reminder of how easily control can slip away. He turns back to her, a faint smile forming. I owe you, he says, the words instinctive, familiar, the kind he has used in 1,000 different contexts, but Lan's expression shifts almost immediately, something closing off behind her eyes. No, she says, shaking her head once, firm, you do not owe me anything, and the way she says it carries weight, like a boundary drawn long before he arrived, and Ethan pauses, caught off guard. At least let me pay you for your time, he adds, reaching instinctively toward his pocket. But she steps back slightly, the movement small but decisive. Keep your money, she says, her voice calm but edged now. Out here, we help because it is right, not because we expect something back, and there is no anger in her tone, just a quiet conviction that lands heavier than any accusation, and for the first time, Ethan feels something shift inside him, something unfamiliar, a realization that not everything can be solved with a transaction, not every moment can be measured in value or return. The wind stirs lightly, brushing through the rice, and Lan picks up her hat, placing it back on her head before turning toward the field, as if the moment is already over for her, as if she has given what needed to be given and nothing more. But before she can walk away completely, Ethan speaks again, his voice lower, more careful this time. What is your name? And she pauses, just for a second, glancing back over her shoulder, the sunlight catching the edge of her face. Lan, she says simply, and then she looks forward again, ready to disappear back into the rhythm of her world, leaving him standing there, no longer just a man with a broken car, but someone who has just been handed something he does not yet understand how to hold. Lan walks away without looking back, her figure blending into the tall golden rose as if she belongs to the land itself, and for a moment Ethan just stands there beside the SUV, the engine now quiet, the world around him stretching wide and unfamiliar, and something about the stillness lingers, something he cannot quite explain, because in his world, moments are measured, scheduled, optimized, but here, time feels different, slower, heavier, like it is asking him to notice things he usually ignores. He glances down at his hands, still marked with streaks of dried mud, and instead of wiping them clean immediately, he pauses, almost studying them, as if they tell a story he has never read before. Then he looks toward the direction Lan disappeared, the faint sound of rustling rice guiding his gaze, and without fully deciding why, he takes a step forward, then another, leaving the SUV behind for the first time, not because he has to, but because he wants to understand what he just encountered. The path is narrow, uneven, the ground soft under his shoes, forcing him to slow down, to watch where he steps, and after a few yards, he sees her again, bent slightly as she resumes cutting the rice with the same steady rhythm, as if nothing happened, as if helping a stranger pull a vehicle from the mud is just another small part of her day, and he stops a few feet away, unsure how to enter her world a second time without disrupting it. "Lan," he says, his voice carrying gently over the field, and she pauses, lifting her head just enough to acknowledge him without turning fully. "You should go before the sun gets worse," she replies, not unkind, just practical, and he nods, even though she cannot see it. "I will," he says, then hesitates, searching for something more honest, something less transactional. "I just wanted to say thank you properly," and this time she turns slightly, her eyes meeting his, measuring him in a way that feels quiet but precise, like she is deciding whether his words mean anything at all. "You already said it," she answers, her tone neutral, and he exhales, a faint smile forming despite himself. "Where I come from, people say it a lot," he admits, sometimes without meaning it, and there is a brief pause, the kind that feels heavier than silence, before she responds, "Then maybe here you should only say it when you do," and something about that lands deeper than he expects, simple, direct, impossible to argue with. He shifts his weight, glancing around at the endless rows of rice, the sky stretching wide above them. And for the first time since arriving in this country, he feels how small he is in a place that does not recognize his name, his company, or his influence. "Do you work here every day?" he asks, not out of obligation, but out of genuine curiosity now, and Lan nods once, returning her focus to the stalks in front of her. "Every day that the land allows," she says, her hands moving again, precise and steady, and he watches for a moment, noticing the efficiency in her movements, the way each cut is deliberate, practiced, earned through years of repetition, and without thinking too much. He steps closer, crouching slightly. "Can I try?" he asks, the question surprising even himself, and she stops again, looking at him fully this time, her brows drawing together slightly, as if she is trying to understand whether he is serious. "You will not last 5 minutes, she says plainly, and he lets out a quiet laugh. "That sounds like a challenge," he replies, and after a brief pause, she reaches into the small pile beside her, picking up an extra tool and handing it to him without ceremony. "Then try," she says, and Ethan takes it, the handle rough against his palm, unfamiliar, grounding, and as he mimics her movement, awkward at first, uneven, he realizes quickly how much skill is hidden in what looked simple from a distance. The angle, the pressure, the rhythm, all of it demanding attention he is not used to giving, and after only a few attempts, he exhales, shaking his head slightly. "You were right," he admits, a hint of humility in his voice now, and Lan watches him for a second, then returns to her work. "I know," she says quietly, not with pride, just with certainty, and for a brief moment, standing there in the middle of a field he was never supposed to enter, Ethan feels something shift again, something deeper this time, like the beginning of a question he has never asked himself before. And as the sun continues to press down, and the sound of cutting rice fills the air once more, he does not rush back to his car, he does not check his phone, he does not think about the meetings waiting for him somewhere far away, because for the first time in a long time, he is exactly where he needs to be, even if he does not yet understand why. The blade feels heavier in Ethan's hand with each movement, the simple motion of cutting rice turning into something that demands patience he has never practiced, and after a few more uneven attempts, he straightens slowly, rolling his shoulders as if trying to shake off a weight he did not expect, while Lan continues without pause, her rhythm unbroken, her focus steady as the rows around them gradually shorten, and for a while neither of them speaks, the silence no longer awkward but filled with the quiet language of effort and observation. The sun shifts slightly in the sky, its heat pressing down like a constant reminder of where they are, and Ethan glances toward the horizon, then back at her. "How long does it take to finish all of this?" he asks, his voice carrying a mix of curiosity and disbelief, and Lan follows his gaze briefly before answering. "Days, sometimes weeks," she says, her tone even, as if the scale of it is something she has long accepted, and he nods slowly, trying to process what that means, measuring it unconsciously against the timelines he is used to, deadlines set in hours, decisions made in minutes. And for a moment, he feels the gap between those worlds more clearly than ever. A faint breeze moves through the field, lifting strands of hair at the edge of Lan's face, and she pauses just long enough to adjust her hat, her eyes scanning the sky as if reading something invisible to him. Rain might come later, she says quietly, more to herself than to him, and Ethan looks up instinctively, the sky still bright, almost cloudless. It does not look like rain, he replies, and she gives a small shrug. It does not always need to look like it, she says, returning to her work, and he cannot help but smile slightly at that, the way she speaks in truths that do not need explanation. After a moment, he steps back from the row, resting the tool against his leg. Why did you help me? He asks, the question coming out more direct than he intended, and Lan stops again, this time turning fully toward him, her expression unreadable for a brief second before it settles into something calm but distant. Because you needed help, she says simply, and he exhales softly. That is it, he presses, not challenging, just trying to understand, and she nods once. That is enough, she replies, and there is something in her voice that closes the question, something that suggests there are no hidden layers, no conditions, just a truth he is not used to hearing. He looks down at the ground, at the broken stalks beneath his feet, then back at her. Where I come from, people usually expect something back, he admits, and Lan studies him for a moment, then glances out over the field. Maybe that is why they are always looking for more, she says quietly, and the words linger in the air longer than he expects, settling somewhere deeper than logic. The sound of an approaching engine drifts faintly from the distance, and both of them turn toward the dirt road, where a small motorbike appears, moving slowly along the edge of the field, and Lan's posture shifts almost imperceptibly, her shoulders tightening just slightly before she looks back at Ethan. You should go, she says again, more firmly this time, and he senses the change, the subtle boundary returning. Is something wrong? He asks, and she shakes her head. Nothing that concerns you, she replies, her tone not harsh but clearly closing the door, and for a moment he hesitates, as if deciding whether to stay or respect the distance she is creating, and then he nods, stepping back, placing the tool carefully where he found it. I will come back, he says, the words slipping out before he can filter them, and Lan pauses, her eyes flickering toward him with something unreadable, something between doubt and quiet warning. People like you do not come back, she says softly, and he meets her gaze, something steady forming in his expression now. Maybe I am not like the people you think, he replies, and for a brief second, the space between them feels charged with something new, something neither of them fully understands, before she turns away again, returning to the field as if the conversation has already ended, leaving Ethan standing there a moment longer before he walks back toward the SUV, the mud now dry on his hands, the heat still pressing against his skin, but the weight he carries no longer feels the same, because somewhere between the broken road and the endless rice fields, he has stepped into a world that does not measure worth the way his does, and for the first time, he is not sure which one makes more sense. The engine starts with a low, controlled hum, the kind that belongs to machines built for highways and city lights, not narrow dirt paths carved between rice fields, and Ethan sits behind the wheel for a moment longer than necessary, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror where the golden field stretches endlessly behind him, and somewhere within it, a small figure continues to move with quiet purpose, already returning to a life that does not pause for strangers or interruptions. He exhales slowly, then shifts the vehicle into drive, easing it carefully onto the narrow road, the tires now gripping the ground with confidence, but something about leaving feels different than arriving, heavier, as if he is driving away from something unfinished. The SUV moves forward, passing rows of rice that blur gently in the afternoon light, and as the distance grows, he reaches absently into his pocket, pulling out his phone, the screen lighting up instantly with missed calls, messages, reminders stacking one over another, a world demanding his attention, his decisions, his authority, and for a second, he just stares at it, the weight of that world pressing back in, familiar and expected, but this time, it feels louder than before, more intrusive, and with a quiet breath, he locks the screen again, placing it face down on the console, choosing silence over urgency for reasons he cannot fully explain. The road curves slightly, leading him toward a small cluster of homes raised just above the ground, simple wooden structures surrounded by trees and narrow canals, and as he slows the car instinctively, The faint sound of voices carries through the air, laughter mixed with conversation, a kind of warmth that does not come from luxury but from presence, and he watches for a moment as a group of people sit together under a shaded porch, sharing something that looks like a late afternoon meal, their movements relaxed, unhurried, untouched by the constant pressure he knows too well. One of them glances toward the road, noticing the unfamiliar vehicle, and their gaze lingers just long enough to remind him again that he does not belong here, not yet, and he nods slightly out of instinct before continuing forward, the road stretching on as the sun begins its slow descent. By the time he reaches the main paved road, the world begins to shift again, the quiet giving way to distant traffic, to signs of structure and order, and when he finally pulls into a small roadside stop, he turns off the engine and steps out, the air here feeling different, thinner somehow, less alive, and he leans against the side of the SUV, running a hand through his hair as he looks back toward the direction he came from, the fields now hidden beyond distance and trees, and yet still present in his mind with surprising clarity. He reaches into the back seat and retrieves a small cloth he had not noticed before, the faint pattern of a woven design catching the light, and it takes him a second to realize what it is, the scarf Lan had used earlier, left behind without intention or perhaps without concern, and he holds it in his hands, the fabric simple, slightly worn, carrying a faint scent of earth and sun, something real, something unfiltered, and for reasons he cannot fully articulate, he does not toss it aside or place it back carelessly, instead folding it slowly and placing it on the passenger seat beside him as if it matters. The sound of another engine approaches, pulling him back to the present, and a sleek black sedan comes to a stop nearby, its polished surface reflecting a different world entirely, and from it steps a man in a tailored suit, his posture straight, his expression focused, someone who clearly recognizes Ethan not as a stranger, but as the person he has always been. "Mr. Carter," the man says, his tone respectful but urgent, "we have been trying to reach you," and Ethan nods once, his composure returning almost instantly, the shift subtle but unmistakable, like stepping back into a role that has been waiting for him. "I know," he replies calmly, glancing briefly toward the horizon before meeting the man's eyes again. "The meeting can wait," he adds, his voice steady, and the man hesitates, surprised. "Sir, the investors are all ready," but Ethan raises a hand slightly, not dismissive, just certain. "Reschedule," he says, and for a moment, the word hangs between them, unexpected, unfamiliar, and yet final. The man nods slowly, pulling out his phone to make the necessary arrangements, while Ethan turns back toward his vehicle, his gaze settling briefly on the folded scarf resting on the seat, and something in his expression softens just slightly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough to change the direction of everything that comes next, because for the first time in a long time, the path ahead is no longer defined only by business, but by a quiet decision he has not yet spoken out loud, a decision to return not as the man he was expected to be, but as someone willing to understand the place where he once got lost and, somehow, began to find something he did not know he was missing. The city lights reflect sharply against the glass walls of the conference room, casting clean lines across polished surfaces, a world built on precision, control, and decisions that move millions of dollars with a single word, and Ethan stands at the head of a long table, his posture composed, his expression unreadable as executives and investors sit across from him, waiting, watching, expecting the version of him they have always known. The one who does not hesitate, the one who sees land not as life but as opportunity, and yet tonight, something is different, something subtle but undeniable, because while the presentation screen behind him displays detailed projections of a large-scale development project in the Mekong Delta, his mind does not settle on the numbers, it drifts instead to the quiet sound of rice being cut, to the heat of the sun pressing down on endless fields, to a voice that said, "The land does not care about your GPS," and for a moment, he says nothing, his silence stretching just long enough to make the room uneasy. One of the investors clears his throat lightly, gesturing toward the screen. "Mr. Carter, as you can see, the land acquisition phase is already in motion, and once we finalize the agreements with the local farmers, construction can begin within the quarter." And Ethan's gaze shifts slowly toward the image displayed, a clean digital map dividing the land into zones, reducing something alive into sections and percentages, and he feels a quiet tension build beneath the surface, not visible, not dramatic, but present, like a question that refuses to be ignored. "And the farmers?" he asks calmly, his voice even, controlled, and the man nods, confident, Compensation packages have been prepared, standard rates based on current market value, he replies, as if the matter is already settled, and Ethan's eyes narrow slightly, not in anger, but in thought. Market value according to who, he asks, and the room stills, the question simple but unexpected, and another executive leans forward, attempting to clarify, according to regional benchmarks, sir, it is more than fair, and Ethan exhales quietly, his fingers resting lightly against the edge of the table. Fair does not always mean right, he says, almost to himself, and the words hang in the air, unfamiliar in this setting, causing a ripple of confusion among those present. He steps closer to the screen, studying the projected layout again, imagining the rows of rice replaced by structures, the narrow paths replaced by roads, the quiet replaced by machinery, and for a brief second, he sees it not as progress, but as something taken, something altered in a way that cannot be reversed, and Lan's voice echoes faintly in his mind, not loud, not demanding, just present. Out here, we help because it is right. And he closes his eyes for the shortest moment before opening them again, his decision forming with a clarity that surprises even him. We are not moving forward with this plan, he says, his tone steady, leaving no room for misinterpretation, and the reaction is immediate, a shift in posture, in expression, in expectation. Sir, someone asks, uncertain, and Ethan turns to face them fully now, no hesitation in his gaze. Not like this, he adds, we are not taking land from people who depend on it to survive, and the words are not loud, not aggressive, but they carry a weight that changes the room entirely. The lead investor leans forward, concern evident. Mr. Carter, with all due respect, this project has already required significant investment. Pulling back now would, but Ethan raises a hand slightly, not to silence, but to redirect. Then we change it, he says, his voice calm but firm. We build something that works with them, not against them, and the idea lands like something foreign, unfamiliar, and yet undeniable in its simplicity, and for a moment, no one speaks, because this is not how decisions are usually made here, not based on something intangible, something human. He glances briefly at the reflection of the city lights in the glass, then back at the room. Schedule a new plan, he continues, one that keeps their land intact, one that gives them ownership, not displacement, and the executives exchange quick looks, uncertainty mixing with reluctant acknowledgement, because they can hear it now, the finality in his tone, the shift that cannot be undone. The meeting dissolves slowly after that. Conversations quieter, more cautious, and as the room empties, Ethan remains where he is for a moment longer, his reflection staring back at him from the glass, the same suit, the same man, and yet not entirely the same, because somewhere between a broken road and a field of gold, something has changed, something that does not fit neatly into reports or projections, something that cannot be measured, only felt. And as he reaches into his pocket and brushes his fingers lightly against the folded scarf he still carries with him, he realizes that for the first time, the decisions he makes are not just about what he can build, but about what he chooses not to destroy. The morning returns quietly, not with urgency or noise, but with the soft glow of sunlight stretching across the fields as if nothing in the world has changed, and Lan is already there before the heat fully settles in, her movement steady, her focus locked into the rhythm she has known her entire life, cutting, gathering, stepping forward, each motion grounded in something deeper than routine, something closer to survival, and yet beneath that rhythm, something feels different today. Something unsettled, like the faint echo of a conversation she did not expect to remember. The distant hum of an engine breaks through the stillness again, softer this time, more controlled, and she pauses for just a fraction of a second before continuing, telling herself it does not matter, that whoever is coming does not belong to her world. But the sound grows closer, stopping near the edge of the field, and despite herself, she glances up, her eyes narrowing slightly against the light, and there it is again, the same black SUV, cleaner now, steady, no longer stuck, and for a moment her expression does not change, but something in her posture tightens, a quiet recognition she does not welcome. The door opens, and Ethan steps out, dressed differently this time, his shirt crisp again, his presence more aligned with the man he truly is, but there is something in the way he moves, less rushed, less distant, as if he has carried part of this place with him and has not yet decided how to let it go, and he walks toward her slowly, not assuming, not demanding, just approaching, and when he stops a few feet away, he does not speak immediately, giving her space to acknowledge him on her terms, and for a few seconds, she does not, her hands continuing their work, the sound of cutting rice filling the space between them like a quiet barrier. Finally, she straightened slightly, not fully turning, her voice calm but guarded. "You came back," she says, not surprised, not welcoming, just stating what is already clear, and Ethan nods once. His voice steady. "I said I would," he replies, and there is a simplicity in his tone that contrasts sharply with the complexity of everything he represents, and Lan lets out a faint breath, something between disbelief and quiet resistance. "People say many things," she answers, her eyes still not fully meeting his, and he takes a small step closer, careful not to close the distance too quickly. "I know," he says, "but I am not here to say something. I am here to show you," and that finally makes her turn, fully this time, her gaze meeting his with a sharpness that feels almost like a test. "Show me what?" she asks, and there is no softness in the question, no invitation, just a demand for truth. Ethan reaches into his pocket slowly, pulling out the folded scarf, holding it in his hand as if it carries more weight than it should, and when she sees it, her eyes flicker just slightly, recognizing it immediately, the simple piece of fabric now out of place in his polished world, and he holds it out to her. "You left this," he says, and she hesitates for a moment before stepping forward to take it, her fingers brushing against his briefly, and this time she does not pull away immediately, but there is no warmth in the contact either, only a quiet tension, like two worlds touching without fully connecting. She folds the scarf without looking at it, placing it back into her bag as if returning it to where it belongs, and then she looks at him again, her expression unreadable. "You did not come all the way here just for that," she says, and Ethan exhales softly, the truth settling into his posture. "No," he admits, and for a moment, he glances out across the field. The same endless stretch of gold, but now seen differently, understood differently. "I came because I needed to see this place again," he continues, "and I needed to tell you something," and she waits, silent, her patience not encouraging, just allowing him to continue if he chooses, and he does, his voice steady but carrying something deeper now. "The project, the one that was supposed to take this land," he says, and her expression shifts instantly, her body tensing, her eyes hardening as if a door has just slammed shut. "I stopped it," he finishes, and the words hang in the air, unexpected, almost unbelievable, and for a second, she does not respond, does not react, as if she is deciding whether to believe him or dismiss it entirely. "Why?" she asks finally, her voice low, controlled, and Ethan meets her gaze without hesitation. "Because it was wrong," he says simply, and there is no defense in his tone, no justification, just a truth he has chosen. And Lan studies him closely, searching for something behind his words. Something hidden, something that would make this make sense in the way she understands the world, but she finds nothing obvious, nothing easy, and that unsettles her more than anything else, because people like him do not change plans, they do not walk away from profit, they do not return to fields they do not belong to, and yet here he is, standing in front of her again, not as the man she expected, but as something she cannot yet define, and the distance between them feels both smaller and more complicated than ever before. Lan does not respond right away, and the silence that follows feels heavier than before, not empty, but filled with questions neither of them knows how to ask, and she looks past him for a moment, out toward the horizon where the rice fields stretch endlessly, as if searching for something steady, something she can trust more than words, and when she finally looks back at him, her expression is no longer just guarded, it is conflicted, like something inside her is shifting but refusing to settle. "People like you do not just stop something like that," she says slowly, her voice quieter now but still firm, and Ethan nods slightly, accepting the truth in her doubt. "You are right," he replies, "they do not," and there is no attempt to defend himself, no urgency to convince her, just a calm acknowledgement that makes it harder for her to push him away completely. She studies him again, more carefully this time, noticing the details she ignored before, the way he stands without the usual confidence she associates with men like him, the way his voice does not carry the weight of authority here, only intention, and it unsettles her because it does not fit the story she has always believed. "Then why did you?" she asks again, her tone softer now, not demanding, but searching, and Ethan takes a slow breath, his gaze drifting briefly toward the field before returning to her. "Because I saw what it means to you," he says, "not in a report, not on a map, but here," and he gestures lightly around them, the motion simple but sincere, "and I realized that what we were planning to build would take something we could never give back." And the words land differently. This time, not as an explanation, but as something closer to understanding. Lan's fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her bag, the fabric of the scarf inside pressing against her palm as if reminding her of the moment they first met, and she exhales quietly, her gaze lowering for just a second before lifting again. Understanding is easy, she says, living with the consequences is not, and Ethan nods again, his expression steady. That is why I am not just stopping it, he adds, I'm changing it, and this time there is a shift, a slight narrowing of her eyes, curiosity breaking through the doubt despite herself. Changing it how, she asks, and he steps a little closer, not invading her space, but enough to show that he is not leaving this unfinished. We are redesigning the project so the land stays with the people who work it, he explains, his voice calm but clear. We build around the fields, not over them, and the farmers become partners, not obstacles, and for a moment, the idea hangs between them, unfamiliar, almost impossible, and Lan does not respond immediately, her mind turning over the words, testing them against everything she has seen, everything she has lost, and everything she has learned not to expect. The wind moves gently through the rice again, the soft sound filling the silence as she looks out across the field, imagining what he is saying, imagining a future that does not erase what already exists, and something in her expression shifts again, not trust, not yet, but something closer to consideration. And you think they will agree to that, she asks, her voice carrying a hint of skepticism, and Ethan allows a small, almost thoughtful smile. They do not have to agree to me, he says, they just have to see that it is better for them, and there is a quiet confidence in that statement, not the kind built on control, but the kind that comes from a decision already made. And Lan notices it, the difference in the way he speaks now compared to the first time they met, and it makes her pause longer than she expects. She looks back at him, really looks this time, not just at what he represents, but at who he might be becoming, and for a brief second, the distance between them feels less defined, less certain, and that unsettles her more than anything else, because it means she cannot rely on her assumptions anymore. You are asking me to believe you, she says finally, her voice quiet but steady, and Ethan shakes his head slightly, his gaze holding hers without pressure. No, he replies, I am asking you to watch what happens next. And the simplicity of that answer lands in a way she did not expect, because it does not demand trust, it does not ask for forgiveness, it only asks for time. And as the sun continues to rise higher in the sky, casting light across the field that has always been her world, Lan realizes that for the first time, she is not entirely certain where that world ends and something new might begin. The days that follow do not arrive with dramatic announcements or sudden changes, but with something quieter, something more difficult to notice unless you are paying attention. And Lan finds herself paying attention in ways she never intended, because the field remains the same, the rhythm of her work unchanged, the sun rising and setting over the same stretch of land, and yet beyond the edge of what she can see, something is shifting, something she cannot ignore. The first sign comes not from Ethan, not from his words, but from the people who begin to visit the village, not in polished suits or expensive cars, but in simple clothes, carrying notebooks instead of contracts, asking questions instead of giving orders, listening more than they speak. And at first, Lan watches from a distance, her skepticism steady, her expectations low, because she has seen promises before, has learned how easily they disappear. But these people return the next day, and the next, sitting with farmers under shaded porches, walking through the fields, measuring not just land, but needs, concerns, ideas, and slowly, quietly, something begins to feel different. One afternoon, as Lan finishes tying a bundle of rice, she notices a small group gathered near the edge of the field, voices low but engaged, and among them, she sees him again, Ethan, no longer standing apart, no longer observing from a distance, but sitting among them. His sleeves rolled, his posture relaxed, listening as an older farmer speaks, nodding occasionally, asking questions that do not sound rehearsed, and for a moment, Lan does not move, does not approach, she simply watches, trying to reconcile the man she met with the one she sees now, trying to decide if this is real or just another version of something temporary. The conversation continues, and eventually, Ethan looks up, his eyes finding her almost instinctively, and there is no surprise in his expression this time, only a quiet acknowledgement, as if he expected her to be there, as if this moment was always part of what comes next. And he stands, excusing himself from the group before walking toward her, not quickly, not hesitantly, just steadily. And when he reaches her, he does not start with explanations or updates, he simply says, "You came," as if the words belong to her instead of him, and Lan exhales softly, a faint hint of something almost like a smile touching her expression before it disappears. "I was already here," she replies, her tone lighter than before, and he nods, accepting that. Understanding the difference, they stand side by side. For a moment, both looking out over the field, the same field that has held all of this together, the place where everything began without either of them realizing it, and after a second, Lan speaks again, her voice quieter, less guarded. "They say the plan is different now," she says, and Ethan nods, his gaze still forward. "It is," he replies, "it is not perfect, but it is better," and she glances at him briefly, studying his profile. The calm certainty that no longer feels distant but grounded. "Better for who?" she asks, and this time, when he answers, there is no hesitation at all. "For everyone who belongs here," he says, and the simplicity of it lands in a way that does not need to be explained. The wind moves through the rice again, the sound familiar, steady, and Lan shifts her weight slightly, the scarf still tucked inside her bag, no longer just a forgotten object, but something that has followed her through every moment since that day. And she reaches into the bag. Slowly, pulling it out, unfolding it just enough to let the fabric catch the light, and then she looks at him, her expression softer now, still careful, but no longer closed. "You said you would show me," she says, and Ethan meets her gaze, something quiet and certain in his eyes. "And I am still showing you," he replies, and for a moment, neither of them looks away, the space between them no longer defined by distance, but by something unspoken, something still growing. Lan folds the scarf again, but this time she does not put it away immediately, instead holding it lightly in her hands as she looks back at the field, the same land, the same life, but now touched by a possibility she never allowed herself to imagine, and after a second, she takes a small step forward, then another, returning to her work, but slower this time, more aware, and Ethan does not leave. He does not step back into the role he once carried so easily. Instead he moves beside her, picking up the same simple tool he struggled with before, his movements still imperfect, still learning, and she watches him for a second, then shakes her head slightly, a quiet breath escaping her as she says, "You are still doing it wrong," and there is something different in her voice now, something warmer, something that does not push him away, and he lets out a soft laugh, adjusting his grip as he tries again. "Then you should teach me," he replies, and this time, when she reaches out to guide his hand, the contact lingers just a fraction longer, not accidental, not forced, just natural, like something that has found its place without needing to be named. And as the sun lowers slowly over the golden field, casting long shadows across the land that once divided them, it becomes clear that neither of them is lost anymore, not in the way they were before, because sometimes, finding your way is not about knowing where you are going, but about choosing where you belong, and for the first time, that choice feels shared.